So you're probably wondering why I haven't released my Action 6 versus Ace Pro 2 comparison video yet. And it's not because I haven't fully tested these cameras, it's because DJI keeps releasing firmware that's changing the way the camera behaves. Now that's not necessarily a bad thing, but it does make it difficult to make a comparison video and declare a winner when a firmware update changes the entire outcome. So by the end of this video, you'll know exactly what I think is going on with DJI and the Action 6, and whether or not this last firmware update, 1.02.05.21, gets us to a stable enough place to where we can fairly compare these two cameras and decide for us who the winner is. Or if it makes more sense to wait until another firmware update and reassess at that point. But there are a couple of issues that worry me the most, and neither one can be fixed with a firmware update. So this is what firmware 102.05.21.67 looks like. Just kidding, y'all. My son will be 12 years old by the time this video comes out, so everyone wish him a happy birthday down in the comments. We're also in D-Log-M with the texture to -2 and the noise reduction to to 0. I've been playing around with these settings. These are one of the things that I was confused on because I was seeing a lot of noise in the footage when I had noise reduction set at -1. So I'm hoping that they corrected the issue. So I'm going to switch this up to a -1 for the rest of the video, and we'll see what that looks like. So this is at noise reduction -1. I do also have exposure set to -0.7. And this kind of highlights some of the issues that I was seeing on previous footage and my initial impressions video as well. I'm hoping and I'm thinking that this firmware is pretty much what we would usually expect a DJI release to be on. We kind of got the camera before DJI was able to have several firmware updates that corrected all the major issues. So let's take a walk and take a look at these settings and see what we've got. We also have the issue with the accelerated release of the Nano because many of us, including myself, completely dismissed that release because of the overheating issues, the issues with the vision dock. But now you've got, after the firmware updates came out and fixed most of those issues, you see a lot of these videos, I was wrong videos. You know what I'm talking about. And that's what I'm trying to avoid doing. Not that I mind being wrong, especially when it's wrong in a more positive way, but I just don't have the time, and I don't think you do either, for me to be releasing, oh yeah, they updated this in this firmware. So that's what we're doing today. We're just trying to get an idea if this is, at least a stable firmware to where they fix most of the major issues, and then we can move forward with the actual comparison. And I may actually include the Nano because it's supposed to be here tomorrow. So that might be an extra added bonus. So like I said before, when I was shooting the initial impressions video, as well as when I took the camera down to Myrtle Beach for my company's Christmas party, I did see additional issues. I saw that the exposure was jumping around, which does tend to happen with these action cams, but I don't remember it happening as much with the Action 5 and with the Ace Pro 2 as well. The other issue that I was noticing more prevalent on the Action 6 was noise. At noise reduction set to -1, I was seeing noise at ISO 1600. And when I took the ISO down to 800, it just didn't have quite the exposure that I needed in most lighting situations. So to be completely honest with you, at first I thought it was just my settings that needed to be tweaked. Maybe they were just differently calibrated on the Action 6 compared to the Action 5. And that still may be the case, but that's what the purpose of this video is, to find out exactly where we should be setting the camera so I can do the comparison in as many auto settings as possible, but yet give you what I feel like is the best possible image that you can get out of either camera. So the good news is that I believe that the issues with the Mic 3's gain have been at least improved, if not fixed 100%. And that was pretty much the straw that broke the camel's back for me to say, hey, we need to hold up because this thing's got some issues that can easily be resolved with a firmware update. So going back to what I was talking about with this being released at a similar point to where, you know, those YouTube creators that get the cameras early are used to seeing, because I remember a lot of their reviews, they'll be like, remember, this is pre-release firmware, so this issue may be resolved before it's released to the public. And oftentimes it is, if you actually take notice of things. So for the rest of this was kind of a good experience for us to go through. If we ever do get lucky enough to become creators that get cameras early release, we won't be so highly critical maybe to jump on the bandwagon of criticism, which is really easy to do, because you've really got to take into consideration that these cameras are really at the bleeding edge of technology, and that technology is really hard to do because honestly, no one else is doing it. It's not like you can just snap your fingers and make a 4K cam into an 8K cam. Or I guess maybe DJI can do that. So speaking of 8K, I know that's a great addition to this camera, but I think that too is going to require some more testing. Also be really cautious of the 4K videos that you're looking at when the camera was set to 8K, because if you're not viewing it in 8K timeline, you're not really seeing exactly what that is going to look like, because what will happen when it's rendered down to 4K is that the software that they're using will compress the image in its own way, and you'll end up getting a result that isn't representative of that true image at 8K. So I think a video like that would need to be its own separate 8K comparison, which I may do in the future. So what conclusions can we come to so far? First and foremost, it's not a leap and bound above the Action 5. Hopefully after the firmware updates have matured, this camera, it will produce an image that is better overall in most ways than the Action 5. They've also fixed the build quality on the USB-C and battery doors compared to the Action 5. And although the variable aperture edition is the first on any action cam, I don't think that it leads to that much advantage in comparison to a non-variable aperture unless you're using the macro lens. So let me explain. With the variable aperture, if it goes under I would say 2.4 or something like that, you do have a close focus issue with this camera. And I'll show you some footage when I was driving to Myrtle Beach and the aperture was hitting that f2.0, f2.2 kind of range. And I wasn't really careful. I was kind of resting my elbow on the center console of the car. And you'll see here that it got kind of blurry there, and you can definitely notice it. Now the camera does tend to choose f2.8 and kind of stick there unless you go into super night mode or you attach that macro lens. And in super night mode, you're probably not going to notice it because the ISO is going to be cranked, noise reduction is going to be working, and the image is going to look processed anyway. But with the macro lens and that f2.0, that fixes the minimum focus distance issue that you've got, and that low aperture value will let in a whole lot more light, or at least one stop more light, and let you get a little bit of background blur. It kind of makes the Action 6 look close to the Pocket 3's image. Although with the Pocket 3, you get true autofocus, you get a true 1-inch sensor, and in my opinion, it just still can't compete. Additionally, it kind of costs about the same once you add on the cost of the macro lens and the camera itself. But for some people, they just don't vibe well with the Pocket 3 like I do. I love that camera. It's my A camera. It's my camera for everything at default unless it's like raining or I'm going to be in a kind of a rugged type of situation and I don't want to get sand on the camera or in the camera or get SPF on it or use an external mic, because I don't want to leave an external mic or any equipment for that matter in my beach bag and then go snorkeling way off. But I digress. I think that the close focusing issue at lower apertures is the other thing that firmware is not going to be able to fix, but the macro lens does fix that close focusing issue. And that's definitely a viable setup. I would say that I could absolutely recommend this camera to someone who just doesn't vibe well with something like the Pocket 3 because they don't like the gimbal. They don't think it's cool to vlog with a pocket camera or whatever the reason may be. If that's you, absolutely, affiliate links down below. Pick up the Action 6, pick up the macro lens, and just be done with it. But honestly, for the rest of you all, I would say wait if you haven't picked one up already until we find out if the image quality of the Action 6 is going to be that much better than the overall convenience of the Ace Pro 2 with its superior internal mic system. And we're also going to find out just how superior that mic system is, because when I was doing my initial testing with this internal mic on the Action 6 with high wind reduction on, it did sound pretty good and it kept out most of the noise. So I could definitely see myself using that when I'm at the beach, when the wind is rolling and the waves are going and everything like that. And additionally, I won't have to worry about that wind cover needing to be taken off, because I have forgot that several times, gotten it wet. It's not that big of an issue, but it still is an issue, even though that's kind of user error. Okay, so I really like this image as well. I've done this walk several times with different cameras, and I'm wondering how this is gonna look, but I just noticed that even though my ISO is allowed to go up as much as it can do, I think it's 12,800 is the max in D-Log M on this camera. It's still setting it max ISO or at ISO 800 for this particular scene. So I need to get into a situation where I can do a little bit of testing of the low light performance on this firmware update, just to test that noise that I was seeing out one more time on this firmware. Hopefully just one more time. All right, guys, so I thought since I had the Christmas tree up, we would end this with a little bit of a low light test to check out what kind of noise we're getting with that noise reduction set at -1. And I'm not holding this forever. I want to show you guys a trick that I learned by accident when it kind of came together in the car when I laid these together in the passenger seat. But this here, guess where it is? It's at that magnetized part at the bottom of the Action 6 where the magnetic mount goes. Now you can't use this with a tripod or use this method with a tripod, but I thought that was pretty cool, and it kind of saves you from having to buy a case if you're going to do this. Now, of course, if you use a tripod or a selfie stick or something like that, you can't do that. But anyway, how is the noise looking here? This is jumping anywhere from ISO 3200, 3600 up to 6400. Really couldn't get it to go over 6400 unless I went in the dead dark. But we should be able to get a good idea of how these noise patterns are going to perform with this new update. I was having trouble getting the ISO to go any higher than 800 when I was out at the park. So yeah, I thought this would be a good way to end the video. So stay tuned for the full comparison between the Action 6, the Ace Pro 2, and I'll definitely need to throw the Nano in there as well, because if the Nano's firmware updates can take it from a completely dismissed camera to creators making videos saying I was wrong, then the Action 6 can as well. See you soon.